Joining me now to discuss this tariff deadline day is research fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research, Tom Savidge. Thanks for the time tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, so is this going to be the big to-do? I know the markets took a little bit of a hit today because of the jobs numbers, which, by the way, every single jobs report Biden ever had were revised down. The 850,000 manufacturing jobs didn't exist, and the government is not hiring as many people as it used to. Also, some people have traded 2 part-time jobs for 1 full-time job. So let's not get crazy. But now that you have Chuck Schumer saying the GDP growth is a mirage, the tariffs are going to bankrupt us. What do you got?
Well, one thing is that it's good to see some certainty with these deals coming in. I'm not too crazy about the tariffs, but at least with these plans, folks, people, businesses will be able to plan around that, and you'll get to see some more activity. Whereas the past couple months with this wait and see, will the deals happen, won't they? You had a lot of people just kind of waiting and seeing, holding still, waiting on bated breath to see what would happen. But now that these deals are coming through, we're at least getting some certainty there.
Well, this is what I don't understand. The Democrats are screaming and yelling about price increases when all through the Biden years they said, well, be patient, right? And they actually kind of gave us a lecture that, well, maybe you should be willing to pay these high prices, for the greater good. The sacrifice will be worth it, as they spent trillions of dollars on the Inflation Reduction Act, which didn't reduce inflation. But is a short-term sacrifice to get better trade deals, to see if we can wait out some other countries, is it worth it?
Well, that's a tough call, because the 2 most important questions in economics are at what cost and what is the alternative? We have to look at, what people have been through, of course, the past 4 years of the Biden administration. And even if there is some long-term gain to be gained there, are Americans willing to put up with a little more short-term pain after 4 years of being told it's just short-term pain, or that, like you said, they should be willing to pay higher prices? The American people have been squeezed pretty hard lately, and hopefully these trade deals coming in, and it was good news about South Korea seeing a lot of that come down, the trade barriers come down, is good news to see, and at least it allows us to export more. And one thing I have to say, though, is that I like Secretary Besant's 2 approaches outside of the trade: the tax and fiscal reform and the regulatory reform. Regulatory reform gets government out of the way, it gets people back to work, and the tax reform means they get to keep their hard-earned money. And that's what's going to drive growth. And if you're worried about the trade deficit, dealing with those 2 aspects, cutting tax and spending and cutting regulations, that'll mean we're building more here. It's easier to build more here. You don't have to go through so much paperwork. I heard a story today about a plant in New York that the Biden administration had, advertised in Syracuse, and it's still under environmental review. If states follow the models of free states like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, where you're cutting regulatory barriers, make it easier for people to get back to work, that is what is going to help people. You see in places like New York, in California, companies, anybody trying to build a business with there is just getting drowned in regulatory compliance and in paperwork. And that is the last thing people want to see.
One of the things about price increases, the Biden price increases were not on the promise of job creation, right? So, look, I like free market economics. I also like buying made in the USA. I know that we would probably wag our fingers and if a Democrat 20 years ago said, we're going to make policy to force people to buy things made in the USA. But if you have people who are, let's say, unemployed and they're on some kind of assistance program and prices go up, but it also creates a job for them, well, isn't more people working better than fewer people working and having some lower priced items? If these trade deals can open foreign markets, and that means the stuff we make sells more, which means we can hire more people to make the stuff so we can sell it. If there was some short-term pain, but the long-term gain is that more people are employed and are not on assistance, is it worth it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. And it's about letting people figure out what industries are available. Like, I know there was a recent debate in Congress over whether or not we could grow bananas at home. And I'm sure there's a lot of, if you put enough time, talent, and energy in there, we probably could, but it would come at the cost of more productive things Americans could be doing. But like you said, I agree with you there that it's good to get people off of these social services, out of those dependency traps that people get sucked into because they get this social service, they go into these programs, and then they make a little money and the benefits get pulled out from under them, and then they get stuck back into the cycle of poverty there. If we work on that, I'm all for that. But I think, again, that would be it would depend on the industry. And I think part of that, too, are many of the heavy-handed regulations that happen at the federal level, of course, which you look at the Federal Register, they cover pretty much everything under the sun, but also in the state level, too. State regulatory codes can be pretty punishing as well. So I'm with you there. I want to get people back to work. I think having these trade deals, again, it'll create that certainty that markets are looking for, and that, even Americans are looking for in everyday life as well.
I always think, like, when you have a quota on a dairy product going into Canada, dairy producers are not going to produce more than they're allowed to, right? But if there are limits on production of any good or service, then the price is affected by that. If you take all the quotas and all the non-tariff trade barriers off, and people could buy what they want from whoever they want, wherever they are, that creates a demand for more supply. And as more supply is made, prices come down and jobs are created. I mean, this is all Econ 101 stuff. I mean, it's lost on some people, but I would like to see a maximizing of production to meet a maximizing of demand without penalties in place. I'll give you the last 20 seconds.
That's right. Getting those non-tariff trade barriers, whether it's tariffs, get those non-tariff trade barriers out of the way. And even at home, too, get government out of your wallet. Let the American people get back to work. Thanks so much for having me on, Andrew.